Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're heading to the Horn of Africa to explore this fascinating link between livestock, small arms, and conflict in the region's pastoral communities. We'll be unpacking an academic paper that takes a close look at southern Ethiopia and northern Kenya. Get this, you'll discover how a history of conflict in the area has been intensified by readily available weapons, how those challenging environmental conditions pastoralists face can actually escalate tensions, and how economic factors come into play.
Yeah, it's a really complex situation. What we're talking about isn't just the occasional clash, but a deeply ingrained pattern of conflict woven into the lives of these communities.
And this paper brings something interesting to light. The vital role livestock plays. I mean, we all know it's their livelihood.
Yeah.
But it goes way deeper than that.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Absolutely. It's not simply about herding. It's about survival,
Yeah.
culture, and identity in these communities. And the contribution these pastoralist communities make to their national economies is significant. Did you know that in Ethiopia, they manage something like 30 to 40% of the country's entire livestock population?
Wow. That's a huge chunk. Okay, so paint a picture for us. What's life like for these pastoralists?
Imagine a harsh landscape where droughts are frequent and resources like grazing land and water are scarce. In these conditions, livestock, cattle, sheep, goats, camels, become a lifeline. They're a source of food, a way to earn income, and they're deeply intertwined with their cultural identity.
It makes you realize just how valuable these animals are to them, not just economically, but culturally too.
Exactly. And this dependence on livestock makes conflict almost inevitable, especially in such a challenging environment. We're talking about conflicts over resources that have been simmering for generations.
You know, for those of us not as familiar with the region, are there any specific examples of these long-standing conflicts?
Absolutely. Think about groups like the Maasai and their neighbors. They've clashed over grazing rights and access to water for centuries. Or look at northwestern Kenya. There you have the Marakwet, Pokot, and Karamojong communities, locked in similar struggles.
It's amazing how these conflicts have persisted for so long.
Yeah,
Yet they often fly under the radar on a global scale.
you're right. It's only in recent decades that the world has really started paying attention. And part of that is because the nature of these conflicts has changed dramatically with the introduction of small arms.
That's like throwing gasoline on a fire, isn't it?
And that's a good way to put it. Suddenly, traditional cattle raiding, which, while disruptive, followed certain codes of conduct, has morphed into something far more violent and commercially driven, especially with the availability of weapons like the AK-47.
Wait, how does this commercial element come into play?
Well, think about the increasing demand for meat, both within the region's growing urban areas and for export. This demand has turned cattle raiding into a lucrative business, creating a dangerous incentive for violence. To give you an idea of the scale, it's estimated there are between 150,000 and 200,000 firearms in the Karamoja region of Uganda alone.
That's a staggering number. It really highlights the shift from traditional practices to something far more dangerous.
And we can't forget about the impact of climate change. As droughts become more frequent and severe, competition for those already scarce resources intensifies, pushing communities to the brink.
It's like a perfect storm brewing. Do you have any specific examples of how droughts have triggered or escalated conflicts?
Absolutely. Take the Pokot community in Kenya, for instance. During droughts, they're forced to graze their cattle in areas they usually avoid to minimize conflict with neighboring groups. But when their survival is at stake, those boundaries become blurred.
It's a desperate situation. You can understand why they might take risks they wouldn't normally consider.
Exactly. And it's not just a hypothetical scenario. The 2000 drought in southern Ethiopia led to a devastating conflict between the Borana, Dagodi, and Gari communities, resulting in significant loss of life and widespread displacement. These droughts act as a catalyst, amplifying existing tensions and making conflict almost unavoidable.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of these issues, climate, resources, and conflict all feeding into each other. But it's not just drought that fuels these tensions, is it? You mentioned something earlier about economic factors playing a role, even when there's no drought.
You're right. Fluctuating market conditions and price volatility can be just as destabilizing, for instance. During tough times, pastoralists might be forced to sell their livestock at low prices to buy essential food grains. This influx of animals into the market then drives livestock prices down even further, while simultaneously pushing up grain prices.
So they're essentially caught in a vicious cycle, losing income from their livestock and facing higher costs for food. It sounds incredibly difficult.
It is, and this economic hardship creates a breeding ground for conflict. Imagine the strain on these communities When they're struggling to make ends meet, tensions rise, and disputes over resources can quickly escalate.
So we've got this backdrop of poverty and hardship,
Hmm.
coupled with easily available weapons and increasingly fierce competition for resources. It paints a pretty bleak picture, doesn't it?
It does, and unfortunately, there's another layer of complexity that often gets overlooked: the challenges surrounding cross-border trade. The lack of formal recognition for this trade further increases the risks for pastoralists.
Can you elaborate on that? What are the specific challenges they face?
Well, there are two major routes for livestock trade in the region. One runs from Filtudolo, Suftu to Mandera, and the other goes through Nigel, Dupluk, and Moyal. Now, these aren't just simple pathways. They represent a complex three-tier market system.
3 tiers.
Okay.
I'm curious, what makes each level unique? Let's start with the most basic level.
Sure. At the most basic level, you have what are called bush markets. These are small, informal gatherings where pastoralists primarily trade amongst themselves, exchanging livestock for needs like herding or local slaughter.
So it's very much a localized,
Yeah.
community-based system at this level. What about the next tier up?
The next level is the intermediate markets, typically located in district centers. Here, things get a bit more complex. You'll find pastoralists buying breeding stock, butchers purchasing animals for local consumption, and traders looking to move livestock further down the line to larger markets.
So it's starting to expand beyond the immediate community and connect to broader trade networks. What about the final tier, the big leagues?
That brings us to the terminal markets, the major hubs that attract buyers from far and wide. What's interesting here is that a significant portion of the livestock sold in these markets, we're talking 70 to 80%, originates from Ethiopia. Markets like Moyal and Mantera in Kenya are major recipients of this cross-border trade.
So we're seeing a huge flow of livestock across these borders. But you mentioned challenges earlier. What are some of the specific risks these traders face?
Well, insecurity is a major problem. We're not just talking about the conflicts we've already discussed, but also highway robbery, banditry, and even competition between traders themselves. All these factors can disrupt trade, leading to stock losses, and ultimately driving up prices.
That makes sense. It sounds like a pretty volatile environment.
It is.
Sure.
In fact, our research even mentions a case where Ethiopian and Kenyan traders were forced to completely abandon cross-border trade due to the dangers involved. It really highlights the precariousness of the situation.
That's a powerful anecdote. It really humanizes the impact
Yeah.
of these conflicts and security challenges.
It does, and the lack of market integration further complicates things. Prices don't adjust smoothly across different regions, meaning traders operating in one area might not benefit from price increases in another, even if those increases are driven by shortages caused by conflict or other disruptions.
So they're essentially operating in a very unpredictable system with limited safety nets. It sounds like a constant uphill battle.
It is, and to really grasp the impact of these challenges, let's zoom in on a specific market that's particularly vulnerable to conflict: the Dupluk market. This market offers a powerful lens through which we can see how conflict and economic vulnerability are inextricably linked. The Dupluk market is it's a key player in this cross-border livestock trade, but it's also incredibly vulnerable to conflict. When violence flares up, trade is disrupted, stock is lost, and prices skyrocket.
So it's a stark reminder of just how deeply these conflicts impact the livelihoods of these communities. It's not just an abstract issue, it's hitting them right where it hurts their wallets.
Exactly. And ultimately, these conflicts have a devastating impact on the pastoralists themselves. Their traditional coping mechanisms are disrupted, their livelihoods are eroded, and they're pushed further into poverty.
It's tragic. Imagine being forced to sell your livestock, your lifeline, at incredibly low prices just to survive during a conflict. It leaves you incredibly vulnerable, making recovery even harder. It feels like a never-ending cycle.
It can be. But understanding these interconnected factors, the climate, the economic pressures, the easy access to small arms, is the first step towards formulating more effective and targeted solutions.
So we're not just talking about throwing money at the problem or hoping it goes away on its own. We need a more strategic approach, right?
Absolutely. For example, facilitating better access to markets, both domestic and international, could help. It could provide pastoralists with more stable incomes and reduce their vulnerability to those price shocks we talked about.
It's about giving them more control over their economic destinies, rather than being at the mercy of these external forces.
Exactly. And along with that, we need to prioritize development in these marginalized areas. Investing in infrastructure, education, and healthcare can help create more resilient communities that are better equipped to handle conflict.
So it's a two-pronged approach. economic empowerment, and social development. It makes sense, tackling those root causes of instability. But what about the elephant in the room? All those small arms, what can be done about that?
You're right. We can't ignore that. We need stronger regional and international efforts to control the flow of these weapons. It's about addressing the root cause of the increased violence, not just treating the symptoms.
It's like trying to put out a fire while someone keeps pouring gasoline on it.
Right.
You need to cut off the supply.
Exactly. But there's another crucial piece of the puzzle: the role of traditional governance structures and customary laws in these communities. We need to figure out how they fit into modern legal systems.
I see what you mean. There's often a disconnect between the two, leading to confusion, resentment, and even exploitation.
Exactly. Finding ways to harmonize these systems is crucial for building trust and ensuring that justice is served in a way that respects local traditions. It's about bridging the gap between the old and the new, finding a balance that works.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act. Respecting tradition while ensuring fairness and justice for everyone. But let's get back to the economics for a minute. You mentioned earlier how pastoralists often have to sell their livestock to buy food grains, putting them in a tough spot. Can you elaborate on that?
You're referring to what economists call the terms of trade. It's a way of measuring the purchasing power of livestock relative to the cost of essential goods like grain. What we're seeing is that these terms of trade have been declining for pastoralists in recent years, meaning their livestock is buying them less and less.
So it's not just that the prices of their livestock are fluctuating. It's that the value of their livestock is decreasing compared to the things they need to buy. That's a double whammy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're facing a multi-layered economic squeeze: droughts, conflict, and even external market forces, like bans on livestock imports from certain regions, all contribute to this problem.
So, to use a simple analogy, it's like their dollar doesn't stretch as far as it used to.
That's a great way to put it. Their purchasing power is shrinking. And this situation is compounded by the other challenges we've discussed, creating a vicious cycle of poverty and vulnerability.
Can you give us a concrete example of how this plays out in a real market?
Absolutely. Remember the DeBluck market we talked about earlier? Our research analyzed price data for livestock and grain over several years, and the findings are quite revealing. They calculated a price index for an average male cow, the most common animal sold, compared to maize, which is a staple food grain.
Okay. So they're tracking how much maize a pastoralist can buy. With the sale of one cow, what do they find?
What they found is that while this price index increased steadily for a few years, meaning the terms of trade were improving, it took a sharp downturn after a severe drought in the late 1990s.
So the drought really threw things off balance.
It definitely played a role. But there are other factors as well. For example, a ban on livestock imports from the region by Gulf states significantly reduced demand, driving down prices. The bottom line is that the amount of maize a pastoralist could purchase with the sale of a single ox decreased dramatically by more than 60% over a few years.
Wow, that's a massive drop. It really highlights how vulnerable these communities are to external factors beyond their control. It's a powerful reminder that these local economies are connected to global market forces.
Exactly. And this underscores the need for interventions that address these systemic issues. Things like market diversification, price stabilization mechanisms, and support for alternative income-generating activities.
It's about building a more resilient system that can withstand these economic shocks. But there's another piece of this puzzle we need to explore, and it's perhaps the most disturbing: the link between these local conflicts and the larger political forces at play in the region.
You're absolutely right. We can't ignore the fact that these seemingly isolated conflicts over resources are often intertwined with larger struggles for power and even political representation. This creates a dangerous feedback loop where local conflicts are exploited or exacerbated by external actors.
So it's not just about who gets access to the best grazing land or water sources. It's about who holds the reins of power, who controls the resources, and who gets a seat at the table.
Precisely. And this dynamic can have devastating consequences, turning local disputes into proxy wars for larger political agendas.
Can you give us some specific examples of how this plays out in reality?
Certainly. Our research highlights several instances where this dynamic has been observed. Take the conflict between the Boran and Geri communities over pastoral resources in Ethiopia, for instance. This conflict became entangled with the Ethio-Somalian wars of the 1970s and 80s.
So a local conflict becomes a pawn in a much larger geopolitical struggle. That's incredibly dangerous.
It is. And to make matters worse, This same conflict was further complicated in the 1990s by an intrastate dispute over the Oromo-Somali regional boundary. It's like adding layer upon layer of complexity, making it even harder to find a resolution.
It sounds like a recipe for disaster. Are there other examples of this dynamic in the region?
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
This pattern is not unique. The Izaka-Gaden conflict over pastoral resources in Somalia was similarly woven into the ongoing tensions between Ethiopia and Somalia, and the traditional Bakwako-Dinka conflict in Sudan was often linked to the civil war between North and South Sudan. It's a recurring theme we cannot ignore.
So these conflicts don't exist in a vacuum. They're influenced by historical grievances, political ambitions, and power dynamics that extend far beyond the immediate communities involved. It really complicates things, doesn't it?
It does. Addressing these root causes requires a multifaceted approach that involves not just local actors, but regional and international players as well. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of these conflicts and working collaboratively to create lasting peace.
It's like untangling a giant knot. You need to understand where each strand is connected to find the right place to start unraveling it.
That's a great analogy, and we need to acknowledge the role of external actors. Governments, NGOs, international organizations, in either contributing to or mitigating these conflicts. Their actions or inactions can have a profound impact on the lives of these pastoral communities.
I see what you mean. Policies that promote land alienation, forced displacement, or resource extraction can exacerbate existing tensions and create new sources of conflict. It's about being mindful of the unintended consequences
Yes.
of well-intentioned development projects or political interventions.
Exactly. But on the other hand, external actors can play a constructive role by supporting peace-building initiatives, promoting dialogue and reconciliation, and investing in sustainable development that benefits all communities. It's about using their influence and resources to foster stability, not instability.
It's about using their power responsibly, recognizing that their decisions have real consequences for people's lives. But there's one aspect of the political dimension we haven't touched on yet, the role of ethnicity in these conflicts. It's a sensitive topic, but it can't be ignored.
You're right. It's a critical piece of the puzzle. Our research highlights the dangers of what's known as ethnic politicization. This is when political elites exploit existing ethnic divisions to consolidate their power or advance their own agendas.
So it's about manipulating people's identities for personal gain, rather than seeking genuine solutions. It's a cynical and dangerous game to play.
It is, and it can have devastating consequences, as we've seen in conflicts across Africa and around the world. When ethnicity becomes a tool for political manipulation, it can deepen divisions, undermine trust, and make compromise nearly impossible.
It's like pouring fuel on an already raging fire.
Yeah.
We need to find ways to de-escalate those tensions, not fan the flames.
Absolutely. We need to promote inclusive political systems that value diversity, ensure equal representation, and prioritize the needs of all citizens, regardless of their ethnic background.
It's about creating a political environment where cooperation and compromise are valued over division and exploitation. It sounds like a daunting task,
Yeah.
but it's essential for building lasting peace.
It is daunting, but not impossible. And that's where our deep dive into this complex topic leads us, to a recognition that addressing conflict in the Horn of Africa requires a holistic approach, an approach that tackles the root causes, from the economic and environmental to the political and social. It's about empowering communities, fostering dialogue, and working collaboratively to build a more peaceful and sustainable future for all.
It feels like we've been laying out this incredibly complex problem with layer upon layer of interconnected challenges. But where do we go from here? What can actually be done to break these cycles of conflict and create a more hopeful future for these communities?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And what's fascinating is that our research points to a bit of a blind spot in many of the existing studies on pastoral conflict. While we've done a good job of dissecting the problems, as we've been doing today, there hasn't been enough focus on exploring potential solutions and conflict resolution mechanisms.
So we've diagnosed the disease, but we're still searching for the cure.
Precisely. And that's where we need to direct our attention moving forward. We need more research that not only analyzes the dynamics of conflict, but systematically evaluates different approaches to conflict resolution and peace building. We need to go beyond understanding the why and start figuring out the how.
I could see that. But how do we go about finding those solutions? It feels like such a multifaceted problem with so many moving parts.
It is complex, but not insurmountable. And a good starting point is to remember that these solutions need to be grounded in the realities of these communities. We can't just impose external models that don't take into account their cultural norms, traditional institutions,
Yeah,
and local knowledge.
that makes sense. It's about finding solutions that are context-specific
Yeah.
and tailored to the unique needs of each community.
Yeah.
But are there any existing models or practices that could be built upon?
Absolutely. And this is where things get really exciting. Because there's a wealth of knowledge and experience within these communities that can be leveraged for peace building. Remember those traditional conflict resolution mechanisms we touched on earlier? They offer a powerful foundation to build upon.
You're talking about things like the Well Council
Yeah,
and the Arar.
exactly. For centuries, pastoral communities have developed sophisticated systems for managing conflict. They often rely on dialogue, negotiation, and a concept known as restorative justice, which focuses on repairing harm and restoring relationships, rather than simply punishing wrongdoers.
So it's not about imposing winners and losers,
Uh-huh.
but finding ways to address the underlying issues and move forward together.
Exactly. And our research highlights examples like the Well Council and the Ara among the Borana community in Ethiopia that demonstrate the effectiveness of these traditional approaches.
Can you refresh our memory about those examples? How do they work in practice?
Of course. The Well Council is a community-based institution responsible for managing access to water resources. Remember, water is a frequent source of conflict in these arid regions. It's made up of respected elders who mediate disputes and ensure the equitable distribution of water, preventing conflicts from escalating into violence. It's a preventative measure that addresses potential problems before they boil over.
It's like having a built-in safety valve for the community. What about the Aurora? How is that different?
The ARA is a more formal system for resolving disputes. It's often used for issues like theft, grazing rights, or even interpersonal conflicts. It involves a structured process of negotiation, mediation, and reconciliation, often leading to agreements that restore harmony within the community.
It's fascinating how these traditional systems prioritize restoring relationships and finding solutions that benefit the entire community, rather than just focusing on punishment or retribution. A very different approach than many modern legal systems.
It is, and it offers valuable lessons that can be applied to modern peace-building efforts. We need to move away from purely adversarial approaches to conflict resolution and embrace more collaborative and restorative models. Models that emphasize dialogue, understanding, and finding common ground.
It's about building bridges, not walls.
Yeah.
But how do we practically bridge the gap between these traditional systems and modern governance structures? It seems like there's often tension between the two.
You're right. It's a delicate balancing act. We need to respect and support traditional institutions and customary laws that have served these communities for generations. But we also need to ensure that these systems are fair, just, and aligned with broader human rights principles.
It's about finding a middle ground that honors tradition, while upholding fundamental values of equality and justice for all.
Exactly, and this requires open dialogue, collaboration, and a willingness to learn from each other. Governments, NGOs, and international organizations need to engage with traditional leaders and community members to understand their perspectives and find ways to integrate their knowledge and expertise into formal peace-building processes.
It's about creating a more inclusive and participatory approach to peace building, recognizing that lasting peace can only be achieved when it's rooted in the communities themselves. It sounds like a real paradigm shift from top-down, externally imposed solutions.
It is, and it brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with. Imagine if we could harness the power of technology to support and enhance these traditional peace-building mechanisms.
That's an interesting idea. How do you see technology playing a role?
Well, think about it. We live in an increasingly interconnected world where information flows rapidly across borders. Could we use technology to create platforms for dialogue and conflict resolution that connect communities across vast distances?
So, like virtual peace councils or online mediation platforms. That could be incredibly powerful.
Exactly. We could use mobile technology to share information about conflict, early warning signs, connect communities with resources and support, and even facilitate virtual negotiations.
It's about using technology as a tool for peace, not as a weapon of war, which we sadly see all too often.
Precisely. And this is just one example. There are countless other possibilities for how technology can be harnessed to support peace-building efforts. From using data analytics to map conflict patterns and identify potential triggers, to developing early warning systems that alert communities to impending threats.
It's about being creative, innovative, and exploring new ways to leverage technology for the greater good. It's an inspiring thought.
It is, and ultimately, it's about recognizing that peace building is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It requires a nuanced approach that combines traditional knowledge with modern tools, local expertise with global perspectives, and a commitment to collaboration and shared responsibility.
So it's a complex challenge, but one that's worth tackling head-on, because the stakes are simply too high. The lives and livelihoods of millions of people in the Horn of Africa depend on our collective efforts to build a more peaceful and sustainable future.
And as our deep dive into this topic has shown, it's a future that's within our reach. If we're willing to learn from the past, embrace innovation, and work together towards a common goal.
Well, that's a powerful and hopeful note to end on. Thank you so much for taking us on this incredibly insightful journey through the complexities of conflict in the Horn of Africa.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure.
And for you listening. We hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on these critical issues. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep. Let's